Hello guys, Crispy here, welcome back to another video. With this one, my friends, I'm going to be testing the Radeon RX 6700 XT in Fallout 4. This one is the Sapphire Pulse edition of the card. We are running it with the latest AMD drivers and I'm not manually overclocking it. You can see all of its specs right here as usual. In tech power-ups, GPU Z, resizable bar is also enabled there. And over on the left, we're pairing it with a Ryzen 9 7950X3D with half of its cores disabled, so it's basically the same as a Ryzen 7 7800X3D, and 32GB of DDR5 6000MHz RAM in dual channel. Of course, these are overkill specs for a 6700 XT, but the point of this video is to test the GPU without CPU bottlenecks, and even then, in the city, we will have CPU bottlenecks. Anyways, let's get right into it, shall we? First, let's go over the settings. I'm starting at 1080p resolution, and I'm also going to test this one at 1440p and 4K resolutions. TAA is being utilized, 16 samples of anisotropic filtering as well, and the ultra quality preset. I'm just going to disable the motion blur right there, and that's it. And here we have it. Let's start counting our FPS. We're getting 140s. Oh my god, that's a big scorpion. Stop it! Stop it! Okay, come on, I got a minigun. How come you don't die? Jesus! Alright, that took a while. There we go. Okay, so around here is actually one of the most intensive areas for the GPU to render. Most of you will likely see lower FPS in the city and think that's the most intensive area in the game, and it is the most CPU intensive area, and since people will probably pair this GPU with like a Ryzen 5 5600X, it will be CPU bound there, not around here though. So you'll end up getting more FPS here. However, I have a GPU bound system, of course, so we can properly test the GPU, and in these areas with a lot of vegetation, a lot of grass and stuff like that is where the FPS usually drop the most. So it gets down into like the lower 100s. It's definitely a super smooth experience and way better than like the RTX 3060 was, that's for sure, although I tested that in a little bit of a different area, but usually around these vegetation areas it's around the same FPS, depending on the time of the day as well. That makes quite a huge difference, as I showed in the 4070 Super video. I played around with some of the daytime settings a little bit, and yeah, during the night, for example, you definitely get way higher FPS. Also, it's probably because of the God Rays option, because that's a real FPS killer back in the days when this game came out. God damn it. Come on. I can't shoot him, and I can't move. Are you serious? Okay. There we go. Come on. Hello? No, you know what? We're gonna explode this car if we can. Come on. Let's go. There it is. Nope, it completely missed the guy. Okay. What can we do? The minigun isn't really the best option right now, is it? Hello? Where did he go? There he is. Oh my god, that's a big boy right there. Look at that. Damn. Anyway, we're here in the big city, seeing 140 frames per second, 150s. It's kind of the same still, but we're starting to see a little bit of a CPU bottleneck. You can see that GPU utilization is fluctuating quite a bit now. Although it's not as bad as it was with like a 4070 Super, because this is a slower GPU, of course. So it will max out before hitting the bottleneck on the CPU quite a lot faster than those other very high-end GPUs. But compared to that area with a lot of vegetation, we're now seeing 180 FPS. Sometimes it drops down to around the same values, but it's because of the CPU again. And what is happening here? Let's go to the good neighbor, actually. There was someone in the comments saying that this was a very intensive area. Maybe if you're CPU bound, but not even then. Like, the GPU usage is now at 100%. It's getting 200 plus FPS. Yeah, I don't know. Over here, 180s, 190s, 70s at times. Yeah, it's kind of the same thing, if not better than what we've seen previously. Also, I'm just gonna set the game hour to 10 AM because, well, I don't really like to benchmark at night. Things are prettier during the day, and we got those God Rays once again. Also, I'm not sure if I mentioned the physics, but yes, I am running very fast right now because of the physics being broken in this game. They're tied to the FPS. There are mods that can untie the physics from the FPS, but they're broken now with the next gen update, so this is what we have. Also, I wouldn't utilize it for these benchmark videos because I can cover more areas if I have the FPS unlocked when the physics tied to the FPS, because it runs faster, right? Anyway, with that said, that's enough 1080p. Let's try it out at 1440p ultra settings next. All right, here we go. Going up to 2560 by 1440 now, still using the same ultra settings here. Okay, we're back in an intensive area for a GPU again, with a lot of vegetation around us, and let's start counting our FPS. It's getting 120s around here with more dense bushes and stuff. It drops down into the lower 100s, 80s, 70s at times. Okay, starting to get pretty intensive, but it's still ultra settings. And with the RTX 3060 and also with the RTX 4060, they both dropped from 60 FPS at these settings. I needed to drop it down to high settings instead to make it not drop from 60. So this is quite a showing over here from the 6700 XT, beating both of those mid-range-ish GPUs from NVIDIA. You do lose DLSS and frame generation support on the RX GPU, 6700 XT over here, but I mean, it's way stronger of a graphics card, and you gain 4 gigabytes of VRAM as well. Not that it matters here in this particular title, because it uses like 3 gigabytes and allocates 4, but it's nice to have in the recent games, you know, that can actually utilize a lot of VRAM. So yeah, that's why I've been recommending this GPU instead of like the 4060 and the 3060 for a really long time. Also 3060 Ti, it's very similar in performance to that card, so it is a little bit faster than the 4060 as well. Yeah, it's a great card for the money. You know, I wish more people were aware that AMD is actually really good in terms of value with these mid-range GPUs from last generation, because I see a ton of people just caring about NVIDIA, not caring at all about AMD, and my videos on AMD GPUs end up not having a ton of views because of it. There's not that much interest compared to NVIDIA cards, unfortunately. Anyways, if you are in the market for a 6700 XT, well, this is a really, really good card, as you can see. You can indeed just utilize 1440p resolution native, get a high refresh rate experience once they fix the mod for the physics, you know, and it's pretty. It's pretty and it's responsive. It doesn't really stutter too much, although sometimes those little stutters will happen, as you could see there. And yeah, that was really, really good timing, actually. Now, this isn't exactly the same area where we tested the RTX 4060 or 3060, but again, it's very, very similar in terms of density and vegetation and so on, and we've already seen it drop to 90 frames per second, actually. So it dropped from 100 frames per second right there. Once again, I'm gonna go over here to this different area. I think in this direction it also drops FPS like crazy. I'm gonna start counting our FPS now. Oh, stop it, thank you very much. Yeah, around here, 100 FPS. Yeah, I can't really seem to drop it too much from what we've seen so far, guys. Around here, 84, 87, okay, 78, 79. But that's worst case scenario, basically. It won't really drop from 70, I guess. 72, okay, finally, dropping a little bit further. The time of the day is also a little bit different now, and I think this one is a little bit more intensive as well, because we got more shadows being casted and so on. So yeah, it's great to see that the 6700 XT doesn't have a problem running this, dropping down into the 70s minimum, basically. Nice stuff. Nice stuff. Once again, I was expecting a little bit lower performance coming from this. You can play on Ultra. And by the way, if you want to play on high, you can expect 30 more FPS or so. So it's definitely going to be a high refresh rate experience all of the time on high settings if you want to eventually unlock your FPS with the fix for the physics. So that's it. I'm going to stop it there and we're going to play at 4K res. Here we go, 3840 by 2160 using the same ultra settings. It's definitely going to drop from 60, but I mean, let's try it out and then lower it down to high. Yep, this is it, guys. 33, 35. I guess it will eventually drop from 30 frames, guys. Yep, it already touched 30 FPS flat right there, so it's safe to assume it will dip down from 30 FPS. It's kind of like a console experience on quality mode, for example, that locks the FPS to 30. And you could actually lock it to 30 FPS and have that experience with a controller, for example. I think I forgot to disable motion blur. Not too sure. It's not too obnoxious, actually, so yeah, it's fine. Sometimes you can go up to like 50 frames per second. It's all right. 40s. Starting to get a little bit more playable, right? But once you drop down into the 30s, it gets really, really difficult to control your aim, especially with the mouse acceleration that this game still suffers from, because, you know, they haven't really fixed anything that they should have fixed with the next-gen update. So yeah, 30 FPS is definitely not ideal in this one, guys. 60 is fine, obviously, but I would avoid this experience here on ultra settings. You know what? Let's try it on high settings next, okay? And this is it. A lot of things changed. I'm gonna disable motion blur again. You know what's interesting though? The RTX 4070 Super actually dropped to the 50s, 40s, even 30s, I think, at 4K resolution, which is absolutely insane because this is a much slower GPU. Although with that card, I was utilizing HBAO Plus, which is a more intensive form of ambient occlusion. Still, this didn't deliver a too far off experience at 4K Ultra, but now on high settings, instead, with the SSAO, so all things are equal now, we can actually compare it to the 4070 Super, that GPU was doing like 100 plus FPS all of the time, so it makes sense again, alright? This one's dropping into the 50s, kind of expected after seeing what we saw at 4K, right? I'll reload that, thank you. But yeah, it's definitely way more playable since it doesn't drop into the 40s and 30s anymore, but it's not something that I would utilize either. Unless you really are looking for that 60 FPS experience in town, by the way, in Boston and stuff like that, big cities, you will get like up to 80, 90 frames per second because it's less GPU intensive there. But over in the wastelands, yeah, you can expect 60-ish average, which isn't too bad, really. Let me just change the time of the day. Yeah, kind of the same FPS still. Yeah, as I was saying, it's decent, it's playable, it's just not what I want from a game that's from 2015 with these graphics, right? The graphics don't look too bad, honestly. It feels very full, you know, the game, with a lot of vegetation and stuff like that. But it's a 2015 game, and it kind of looks like a 2015 game at the same time. So you'd expect a 6700 XT, which is roughly like 2080 Ti performance. That was a beast GPU when it came out in like 2018 or 19. You'd expect something like that to be able to run Fallout 4 at 4K with maximum settings and 60 plus FPS 100% of the time. That's not really the case, unfortunately. Still, it is playable nonetheless, and I think we should move on to medium settings to see if we can achieve those 60 plus 100% of the time. Okay, here we go. Medium settings preset is now applied. This is it. Texture quality still on high. Everything else is on medium. Motion blur, gonna disable that. Let's go. And well, instead of getting like 50 to 60 frames most of the time, we're now at 70 to 80. That's pretty reasonable. It doesn't really look bad by any means, you know. It's medium settings and it looks kind of like high settings, especially if you use like ultra textures, for example. It gets really close to ultra even. I mean, the shadow quality at the distance especially, and the shadow render distance, as you can see, is nothing special now. It's very noticeable, the pop-in, and also the grass render distance isn't as high, although I mean, it's still passable in my opinion. You can see a lot of grass pop-in, but it's not terrible. Once again, it's gradually loading in the grass as you walk, so I guess it's fine. And it's getting 80-ish frames per second, so if you must play at 4K resolution, I think I would definitely go for these settings. Medium, it will give you those 60 plus FPS all of the time, or 60 locked FPS if you decide to lock it to 60 frames, of course. Alright, let's go this way. Again, I'm not really testing it in the city because it's not as GPU intensive. just CPU intensive. So don't start typing some comments saying like, why didn't you test it in the most intensive area? Well, this is the most intensive area for the GPU to render, not the CPU. And if you're dropping FPS in the city and seeing less FPS there than here, it's because you have a CPU bottleneck. But yeah, looking at these results, you can safely assume that the GPU itself can do way higher than like 80 FPS average inside of city areas, which is great. And that's been it, I think, for this one. Thank you very much for watching. Hope you guys enjoyed it. I hope it was informative and stuff, and entertaining to watch at the very least. And I'll catch you guys in the next one very soon. As always, love you all. Bye-bye. And 6700 XT did really well.